Joining me in the studio is General Mark Kimmitt. He's a retired U.S. Army general. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera, General. Thank you very much indeed. So the Pentagon has issued a report saying that in its estimation, it might take about 6 months to clear the Strait of Hormuz of mines. Now we have a statement from Donald Trump saying he's ordering the Navy to triple its efforts to get rid of the mines and attack small boats if they are seen to be laying mines. I want to talk to you about the strategies that we're seeing here. We have the might of the U.S. Navy and its service personnel on one side, and on the other side we have Iran with small boats and laying mines, or even the threat of laying mines. In your estimation, how much more complicated does that make the situation, and how much more likely is it to prolong the situation?
Actually, I don't think it does either. The fact is that when you have small straits like the Strait of Hormuz, you can imagine during the Second World War in the Straits of Japan, the numerous number of straits, these types of operations, laying mines, countermine activities, blowing through those straits, that's a fairly common naval tactic and a naval procedure on both sides. I don't think it's going to take till next year to make the strait passable. The way you conduct these types of operations, these countermeasure operations, is you basically create lanes for ships to go through. There may be mines in other areas, but the intent will be to try to create lanes through the use of your mine countermeasure capabilities, whether they be boats, underseas, drones, for lack of a better term. We even have dolphins that are trained to discover these types of mines. So the idea would be open up cleared lanes, go through, let the ships go through, and use the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy, and its allies, as you heard from Germany, to escort those ships through.
So in the last 24 hours, we had Iran seizing 2 ships, taking them to their coast, and we've now had, in the last few hours, the U.S. carrying out an attack, or at least seizing a ship in the Indian Ocean. This appears to be, on the face of it, a kind of tit-for-tat thing that's going on, although both sides have their own rationale for the actions that they're carrying out. Is there any strength to the argument that we're in a kind of holding pattern here until such times as either the U.S. or probably more likely Tehran indicates that it is ready to make some sort of move towards the negotiating table?
I think it's going to be the negotiating table where this is solved, because candidly, the main factor is not Iran nor the United States in this dual blockade. It's the insurance companies that insure those ships. They're not going to let those ships pass through this area as long as there's a chance of those ships being blown up in the water. So it will take a period of time, even when either the U.S. declares the lanes open or Iran can demonstrate that the lanes are closed, before the insurance companies will make a decision. We saw this in the counter-piracy operations that I was intimately involved with off the coast of Somalia. The insurance companies were the final arbiter, because this really all comes down not to matters of war and peace, but in terms of money.
And the emphasis on keeping those lanes open, or getting those lanes open and keeping them open for a shorter period of time, seems to be on the United States, because Germany says, yes, it is potentially available to go and do minesweeping operations. Other countries have said the same thing, that they will be part of controlling the strait. All of that is dependent on some sort of ceasefire agreement being in place. So really it's down to the U.S. Navy at the moment to try to clear those lanes.
Yeah, I think, listen, in a bit of self-promotion, I wrote an article about this a few weeks ago, and it was entitled, "Where Are the Allies?" We did this during the tanker war between 1981 and 1988, where we reflagged and escorted Kuwaiti tankers. But we were a non-belligerent at that point. We weren't a party to the conflict. This was between Iraq and Iran. Neither side chose to shoot at the U.S. Navy for fear of bringing them in. There were a couple of incidents, tragic incidents during that time period, but there was no formal hostilities between Iraq, the U.S., Iran, and the U.S. That's not the case now. The case now is the U.S. is not only a party to the conflict, it's a belligerent in the conflict. So the U.S. Navy alone will still be seen as a hostile force in this. One has to wonder whether that would be the case. Would Iran be firing on Germany, France, the United Kingdom, potentially China, as they escort tankers through? That's a problematic issue. The second problematic issue is, although I talked about some of the capabilities the United States has between their underwater drones, their mine countermeasure ships, we have one there, is the fact that the U.S. Navy has much less capability to do this today than it did in the tanker war. So we not only need the allies as non-belligerents, we also need their capabilities, the United Kingdom in particular.
I want to ask you about the deadline, or the apparent lack of a deadline that seems to be the case. Donald Trump has said that he is prepared to keep the ceasefire going until such times as Tehran comes back with a response. But there is a deadline, isn't there? Because if I understand it correctly, he's currently operating under specific rules set around the engagement of war that the president has the entitlement to, in that he can do it for 60 days without congressional approval, but then he has to get congressional approval of sorts. Now, that date is March the 1st. Can you just talk us through what the effects of that might be in terms of the presence that we're seeing from the U.S. in the Strait?
Yeah, first of all, I think the date is actually May 1st.
Oh, I beg your pardon. It is. I apologize.
It's okay.
Yes.
This goes back to the War Powers Act of 1973, where the United States Congress felt that the balance between the executive branch and the legislative branch on matters of war and peace was tilting too much to the White House and too far away from Congress. President Nixon at that time vetoed it, but the veto was overridden. Every president since President Nixon, since 1973, has declared this act unconstitutional. Having said that, there is the War Powers Resolution. There was a notification to Congress at the beginning of the conflict. 60 days later, if the president has not ended the conflict, then he has to get approval from the United States Congress through an up or down vote in either the House or the Senate. Of note, the Democrats have already tried this 4 times prior to the 60-day requirement. It's failed each time. This next one could be a little bit closer because candidly, the war is not that popular. And the elections are coming up, and people don't want to be on the record for an unpopular war. So there are a number of things that could happen. Number one, the president could demand and get a 30-day extension. The War Powers Act says you've got to stop in 60 days, 90 days to ensure the safe removal of troops. The United States Congress could approve it, which means he has to stand down. Although knowing President Trump, he would just continue the war and take it to the courts. So we'll have to see. I don't think that the White House is overly concerned about the War Powers Act constricting or restricting their ability to fight this war.
It's going to be interesting to watch, though, and that's May the 1st. So it's going to be that date. General Mark Kimmitt, retired U.S. Army General, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. So as always, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.